Hi everyone, Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to today's author journey. Very excited. We're doing something a little bit different today, but we are featuring an author, and our special guest today is Bruce Bishop, and he is an author that is here in Halifax, which is where OC Publishing is based. He's originally from Yarmouth, but he also did do part of his post-secondary education here in Halifax at St. Mary's University, and then followed with his education at the Ontario College of Art and Design. And in 1997, he started his writing career, and initially as a freelance writer, and did a lot of travel writing. And for those of you travel enthusiasts out there, he wrote for Fodor's, which was one of my go-to guides whenever I traveled, and also the Michelin Guide. So fast forward, and a few years back, he got the passion for writing longer prose and published his first historical fiction in 2020, and then followed in 2021 by his second, and the third is soon to come out. But what we're going to talk about today is Bruce working through adapting his novel to screen. So I'm going to bring him up and get him to tell you a little bit more about that and delve into that interesting process. Hey, Bruce.
Hi, Anne.
Good to see you. How are things?
Good to see you too, and thank you for inviting me on your show today.
Oh, I'm excited to have you. And for those of you who are watching, as always, please, if you have questions as we're chatting, make sure that you pop them in the comments section. And we have Sue Slade saying hello from Cole Harbour, and one of your old friends, Christine Fowler, saying hi as well. And Bruce and I came into contact a couple of years back, or maybe just a year ago now, at the Paradise Writers Retreat. And so as a Paradise writer now, Bruce is part of the OC Publishing family. So welcome to the author journey. And you've been on the author journey before as well.
I was with two of your other authors. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talked about historical fiction, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
you've been very busy, not only writing your next book, but spending some time learning how to write scripts. How's that coming along?
Oh boy, it's talk about a journey and a learning curve. I don't think it's something anybody could just take lightly. In other words, if you hadn't been a writer for a while, to suddenly jump in and attempt to write a script of any length, it's very difficult. I'm finding that learning curve harder than it was in learning how to write a proper novel and all the rules and regulations that go along with that. But it's exciting, and so I feel like I am wearing two hats all the time, every day. And in the morning, I might put on the script writer's hat, and then in the afternoon, I'm back to doing revisions on the third novel.
On your novel. Well, I can certainly relate. And I think most novelists out there can relate to, as you're writing your novel, you are picturing the scenes, you're picturing your characters, you're giving them, facial characteristics, you're putting clothes on them. So by the end of writing a novel, you do have sort of a movie-like impression of that novel. So I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are like, yeah, I can see my characters in the novel. And I actually attempted to write a script many moons ago when my first novel published, and was working with a script writer in LA. And it really is a hard shift to make. So, I mean, what are some of the real critical points to consider if somebody really thinks that their novel would make a great movie or TV series?
Right. Yeah. I think initially you've got to figure out, is my work cinematic enough? Is it the kind of story that has a fair bit of action in it? And I don't mean car crashes and that kind of thing, but just scenes that are relatively short, where there is dialogue, where you're not in the brains or the heads too much of your main characters.
Mhm.
So if it's cinematic in your eyes, if you can visualize it as you're writing it, you do begin to see it almost as a screenplay or a TV script. I just before we came on today, Anne, I looked up to see what well-known movies in the recent past have been written by the authors of those novels, and I came up with seven that are rather interesting.
Oh, do share.
Um, yeah, the probably one of the most well-known movies would be Jurassic Park,
Oh.
which was written by Michael Crichton,
Mhm.
and after uh, the the initial success of the book, he was offered, and this is back in the early '90s, $500,000 to write the screenplay for it. And I don't believe he'd ever written a screenplay before that.
That's quite
Similar,
motivating though, isn't it?
it is, and similarly, Mario Puzo, who wrote The Godfather, is
Mhm.
probably the best known author to have turned his award-winning novel into an Oscar-winning adapted screenplay. And Mr. Puzo had never ever written a script before and didn't have a clue about how to begin it. So imagine that. Um, the Cider House Rules, John Irving, he wrote the screenplay.
Right.
Um, Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, she
You
wrote
wrote
the
the screenplay?
screenplay, she
Oh,
wrote the book.
wow.
Clive Barker wrote both the screenplay and the book Hellraiser. Nicholas Pileggi, who I believe was a journalist
Mhm.
before he wrote the book that Goodfellas was based on, and he wrote the screenplay for Goodfellas. And then, of course, one of the most famous movies ever made, I guess, The Exorcist. William Peter Blatty wrote the book and also wrote the screenplay.
Wow.
So it can be done, but more often than not, if you're watching Netflix or any movie, you'll usually see other writers and maybe a whole team of writers who have adapted that novel into the screen form.
Oh, absolutely. And who of us who write fiction haven't pictured like the actor that would play the characters in our books, right? And
Absolutely.
part of the script treatment that I worked on with this scriptwriter in LA was, I mean, she supplied a list of potential actresses for the main character in my book. I mean, your tell us a little bit about your process and how that will unfold, and do you have any actors in mind? And I suppose since it's set here in Nova Scotia, or parts of it are anyway, but I mean, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I have. My three novels, historical fiction, as you said, and all set in Nova Scotia, they're interlinked, but one is not a sequel to the other. So they can be read independently, but there is a thread of similar main characters all the way through the three books.
Mhm.
So in Unconventional Daughters, which was the first book, there's basically two main characters. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
You have them behind you too.
And behind me too, yeah. The two main characters are Eva and Elizabeth, her mother. And so when I was writing it, even I thought this will eventually be, cross fingers, a
Mhm.
Canadian production. And what Canadian mother-daughter acting team would be perfect for Elizabeth and Eva? And I came up with Megan Follows and her daughter.
Ah,
And her daughter is not as well known as an actress. I think she's living in Los Angeles. Megan Follows still lives in Ontario, but Megan Follows is at that age now,
mhm.
50-ish, where she could, and she's so youthful looking anyway. She can look younger, she can look older. She's got a command of the screen. Canadians love Megan Follows because of Anna Green Gables back in
Mhm.
the 80s. So those were the first two women that came to mind once I saw a photograph of her daughter, who's an actress as well, as I said. So that was kind of fun
That
to
is,
imagine that.
and when you're taking those kinds of things into consideration, one of the things that's part of the process is finding that team that will take the script to completion. But what's the first step in order to find that producer or the channel or
I think the first step would be, as to say, is your book the type that would fit easily as a movie, either 90 minutes, 120 minutes, or a TV series, either a limited series, which would be 4 to 6 episodes,
Mhm.
or a full series, which is usually 8 to 10 episodes each season. So
Mhm.
once you've decided that, then you kind of know who you would be pitching your idea towards. In
Mhm.
other words, there are production companies, even here in Nova Scotia, that seem to be only doing movies.
Mhm.
Others seem to be only doing television series,
Mhm.
and because there's so few in our province, they're always busy. They're highly in demand, and especially with the new money that's either being given out or will be given out by the Nova Scotian government to support our local film industry,
Mhm.
they're tough to get a hold of. I've been lucky to speak with one television producer in the province. We have a verbal agreement going on, and there will be, I believe, a much stronger agreement happening fairly soon in conjunction with possibly.
Congratulations.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. Cross fingers again, but again, possibly with another producer out west. That remains to be seen. But the idea is that if you can just get the attention of one producer who's valid, then all of a sudden you're not this writer out in the middle of nowhere, like waving his arms up and down frantically, hoping to be noticed.
Right.
Because, let's face it, there's a gazillion scripts and screenplays produced, or sorry, not produced, written
Yeah.
every single year by so many people, and the amount that actually make it to your Netflix screen or your streaming channel screen are so slim, so minimal. So
I'm seeing lots of parallels between that and finding a traditional publisher as well.
yes.
You could bring on another skill and learn how to produce film, and it would be a self-filmed. But
Oh my gosh. Well, I did try that back in 1988. When I was just a couple of years, I guess, out of the Ontario College of Art and Design University, where I did take film production,
okay.
and that's really where I first learned how to write a screenplay. But again, that's the dark ages, Anne. I didn't remember, anything about
Oh,
that.
I
So I
remember
had to,
slicing film in my TV and film course, so I hear exactly what you're saying.
yeah, you've got to reteach yourself
Yeah.
old skills, kind of thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did attempt to do a feature back in the 80s,
Mhm.
when there was a lot of money being thrown around in Ontario towards independent film,
Mhm.
independent filmmakers. I did manage to get a 20-minute, what they call a demo film or a demonstration film based on the screenplay. It didn't go far. I was out about $20,000 of personal money, but
Right.
at the same time, it was so exciting, and I think that's really what kind of has spurred on this most recent drive to see the novel turned into a series. Like, I've never gotten that out of my head. This has to go on television.
Right. Well, and
Um,
here's the thing, if it keeps, knocking at your brain, then obviously you're meant to see it through, I think. And just the steps that you've taken and the progress that you've made, we were talking earlier, might feel painful and long and drawn out, but from an outside perspective, I think the inroads that you've made are pretty incredible. But it's not without a whole lot of planning and knocking on doors and finding, like you said, the right people with the right script. Because, as you said, when you find the individual who is an independent, film producer or whatever, they often have, a preference, not just whether it's film or TV series. But talk a little bit about why the historical fiction that you've written seems to resonate. Like, why do you feel, and why has it piqued interest?
and there's a flip side to that as well, because while I've been studying how to do this in the last 2.5 years, and I've watched so many webinars and interviews and blah blah blah
Mhm.
of almost everybody saying, for God's sake, avoid historical fiction because it's too expensive to produce. It'll never see the light of day. And
But
every time I'd hear that, I'd get angrier and angrier, thinking, well, damn it, you're not thinking kind of on a bigger picture. Not every single historical fiction movie or TV series has to be on the basis of Downton Abbey, which
right,
which
right.
did cost a small fortune, I'm
Yeah,
sure, and then
they're
spawned.
they're out there. I mean, I've been watching historical fiction, like binge watching series, and there's a ton of them out there. So I find it hard to believe that people don't feel that it's a genre
Well, when
that's
that but when that is brought up, the response usually is, ah, but yes, those projects were green lighted 3 years ago.
oh,
In other words, pre-pandemic, when there was more money to apparently
mhm,
be thrown around. But I'm still convinced. I'm watching right now on Netflix The Empress,
mm,
which is an amazing production.
mhm,
I believe out of Germany, but just looking at the set design and the
mhm,
costumes and all, of course, that costs a fortune.
mhm.
But then again, that series probably has about 8 or 9 production partners, all contributing money. So when CBC recently did The Porter, the historical fiction series that's on CBC Gem and all the rest of it,
Mhm.
around that time it came out, I was on a webinar with a bunch of TV and movie producers across the country, and I was just what do you call it, a spectator. I
Mhm,
wasn't actually in it, but I was allowed to ask questions, just
mhm,
like people today can ask questions on your show.
mhm,
And I guess my question to the woman from CBC was, you've just greenlit and shot The Porter.
mhm.
That's historical fiction. In other words, are you doing more? Will you be doing more? And she essentially answered that no, they won't, because that was given the green light about 2 years ago, and they're now wanting to concentrate on comedies or young adult fiction or
Mhm.
whatever. So we see the ebbs and flows of genres when it comes to television,
Right.
and
It was green lighted 3 years ago. They're hugely popular
now,
now. So, why wouldn't they want to ride the crest? And I'm just watching, and I'm a little behind in the times, but I'm watching the Book of Negroes on CBC Gem, which is based on the book by Lawrence Hill.
yeah.
And it's absolutely riveting. So I honestly I don't think that people lose their taste for learning about history, but I mean,
No, I don't either. But at the same time, it's like the people who make the money decisions are looking at numbers, and if look at the amount of Marvel movies, comic book movies that are out. Well, they make money. That's why they still keep making Marvel
right,
movies.
right.
But I don't know. I'm convinced with now that we have a Netflix Canada office in Toronto,
Mhm.
now that a streamer like that company is devoted, as they say, to producing purely Canadian stories written by Canadians for Canadians, yada yada. Well, then let's look at some historical fiction that is shot in parts of Canada
Right,
that aren't typically, used.
right.
Southwestern Nova Scotia here, well, in Yarmouth, Digby,
Mhm,
Shelburne counties in particular, there's not a lot of big budget movies or television shot in that area,
mhm.
with the exception in 2019 of Robert Eggers' movie called The Lighthouse, a
The
horror
lighthouse.
movie. That
Yeah,
was shot in Yarmouth, and
okay.
that one picture brought so much to the economy and put so many people to work. It was incredible.
Mhm.
So my dream is to see Unconventional Daughters, Uncommon Sons, and Undeniable Relations also be shot in Yarmouth, Digby, and Shelburne counties,
That's fun.
because once again, if if we've got this many professional people here in the province to work on movies
Mhm.
and TV shows, then in my opinion, they should be shot in the location that the author initially chose.
Oh, absolutely.
But
And so you just answered my question. If you envision all 3 novels sort of, being a part of the series.
yes, definitely season 1, season 2, and season 3.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah. Season two, which is Uncommon Sons,
Mhm,
that story takes place exclusively in Halifax in 1935 and 36.
mhm,
And luckily, we still have enough heritage buildings in and around
mhm,
the Halifax Regional Municipality where scenes could be shot.
mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's so exciting. If you need any extras, like pick me, right? Don't forget if you're watching and you have questions for Bruce, feel free to pop them in. And Christine says congratulations. And also, so I don't forget, Bruce will be doing a workshop at the Paradise Writers Retreat in a couple of weeks on exactly this topic, on adapting novel to screenplay. And we still have some space in the retreat, maybe 3 slots, I think. So if you are interested and you want to learn from Bruce, one of the days of the retreat, email me, Ann at ocpublishing.ca, or pop onto the website and get more details on that,
And
ocpublishing.ca.
And just to add to that, Anne, a lot of that morning's session will be about writing dialogue, because dialogue writing dialogue rather in a novel is pretty different in some ways from writing it in a script. So we're going to explore those two elements as well.
Excellent. So, what are some of the differences between writing for film and writing for TV?
Well, between film and TV,
Mm-hmm.
certainly the formatting is different. Most people now, I would say, who are taking this exercise of script writing seriously will fork out some money for the software. It's about $150, $200 called Final Draft. It's sort of the industry standard of screenwriting software.
Mm-hmm.
So Final Draft will allow you to choose a template at the very, very beginning of whether you're about to write a half-hour script, an hour-long script, 60-minute script, or a feature screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, screenplays are anywhere from 90 to 120 pages because each page is the equivalent, approximately, of 1 minute of screen time. And in other words, you would never submit a 200-page screenplay to a producer because he or she would throw it right out the window and say, I'm not interested.
Right.
Already it's too long.
Long, yeah.
So, yeah.
So when you're writing a script, do you, as the script writer, have to write the visuals as well as the spoken part? Like, how does that sort of unfold?
You do write the visuals, but you don't write camera directions. You don't say, extreme close up or long shot or medium shot or anything. You're writing to interest either an agent or a producer or a director who you might want to be involved with down the road. So it's very clean writing. It's very basic writing. There aren't a lot of descriptives. If you were to describe a woman's wedding gown, for example, you might use 4 words, a
Okay.
pretty white dress or something.
Okay.
You don't get into details because down the road, if your script is accepted, that is taken care of by the costume designer, the person hired to do that. You're also not giving camera directions because that's the director's job to tell the cameraman or the cinematographer
Okay.
what to shoot. But yeah, it's the reason why it's difficult for novelists is because we're spoiled in being able to write as much as we want
Right.
about anything.
Flowery descriptions.
Right. We could spend 5 pages on dinner, like what
Yeah.
what
What
somebody
are
had
they
for dinner.
eating? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Instead, in a
Yeah.
screenplay, it's like they had Chinese that night
Right, right,
or something like that.
right. I've
Yeah.
done some script writing in my past for TV. It was mostly like community talk show type thing, or video feed in type scripts. And I always did a side by side that had, the dialogue on one side, or, what was spoken on one side and what was going to be seen on the other. And maybe that's not done so much anymore, or is it different?
I don't believe so, at least not how I'm doing it. Again, I'm following the template of what's in Final Draft, what's in the software. So for my 60-minute pilot episode of Unconventional Daughters, I think it's about 57 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty close to the 60-minute mark. The
Mm-hmm.
hardest thing though about writing the pilot is that you've got to grab that viewer literally from the outset when the credits are barely rolling,
Right.
because people's attention spans are so short. If
Right.
they don't if they don't like your pilot in 5 minutes, they're not going to continue watching it, which
Yeah.
means they're not going to watch the whole series. So it's really important. And what is kind of bothersome in a way, apparently years ago with the early years of television, writers were groomed and taught and helped along in the pilots of all the major TV shows that we grew up on.
Mm-hmm.
It's so different now. It's like, a producer might like the concept and then say to the novice writer, okay, I want to see a pilot, give it to me in 2 weeks. I
Right.
mean, are you kidding me?
No,
Uh,
no, it's for you to take. Yeah.
so it's not easy. I'm finding it, as I said, the hardest thing I've ever had to write is this pilot script, because I've had to revise it and change it so many times. But you do need to hear from people in the industry who've read these scripts. They
Yeah.
do this every day. They read thousands of scripts,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones that get produced are the ones that come to the surface
Rise
somehow.
to the top. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I might add, though, too, because I kind of fell into this trap about a year and a half ago. There are an awful lot of screenwriting and script writing contests out there online. There are about 4 or 5 that are considered to be very legitimate and very worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say there's probably 50 to 60 others that promise you the world if you send in your script. And if you're chosen, then, hey, we're going to show it to all the best Hollywood producers and, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? Every single of these contests average a price of 35 to $85 US
Mm-hmm.
per submission.
Mm-hmm.
And one contest that I've just been keeping my eye on, more out of curiosity than anything else, just announced its winners. And at the beginning of the announcement, it said, we had over 5,000 entries to this, blah, blah. And I'm thinking 5,000 entries times $75 US.
They're making money. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys did real well,
Yeah.
especially when your big prize is $1,000
Yeah.
US. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So don't rely, I don't want any other writers to kind of be falling into that,
Mm-hmm.
uh, led by a dream. I mean, they're
Yeah.
selling you a dream.
Yeah.
So just be very careful with that.
Very true. And when I submitted my pitch was to a company called Reel, REEL Books. And basically it was, do you think that, your novel is cinematic that you talked about earlier? Fill in this questionnaire and, they'll get back to you about blah, blah, blah. And I did, and they did get back to me. Oh, you've won, blah, blah, blah. We're really interested. And part of winning that included having a script treatment written. So I didn't pay for that.
Okay, that's good.
And the script treatment is powerful in my mind. But at that point, then you either have to go away and write the script or you have to hire one of their script writers. So there's the money. So I
Yeah.
did pay for some coaching. I'm like, I can write this. What are you talking about? I've been a writer my whole life, right? So like I had some, coaching hours as part of the package that I then purchased. So you're right. There's always a hook. But I did get a decent script treatment if I were to revisit that. But my book was set in Massachusetts, so I'd probably have to, change the setting to Nova Scotia, maybe.
Right. Well, yeah, script treatments are difficult, and that is, for a TV series, it would be called like a Bible, where you've pretty much mapped out all the episodes in the series
Right,
in a condensed version,
right,
which is what I did with Unconventional Daughters when I divided it into 10 episodes and then had to write synopses of each episode. That was just the start of the treatment. Then you get into character descriptions and all
right.
the rest of it. And something that's new that I don't know if you've heard about yet, that a lot of potential screenwriters are using, is something called a lookbook. And a lookbook it's a series of photographs that you want the producer, director, and and principal crew to look at, so they get a feeling of your project.
Kind of like a storyboard.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So for my lookbook, I put a lot of archival photographs of Yarmouth and area in
Mm-hmm.
it around the turn of the century up until the mid 30s, and
Mm-hmm.
then other pictures just showing different things from that time period that would evoke a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's lots of elements. We're just touching on the surface today. So
So as we wrap up, why don't you share maybe the number one reason I've read the Save the Cat book and all of that kind of stuff. But what would be the number one reference book that somebody should start with?
oh yeah, that's a tough one. I've read an awful lot. I've also heard a lot of people that really don't care for Save the Cat, which is very well known. But
Hmm.
the one that's come out in the past couple of years is, again, it's a self-published book, but it's written by a very prolific screenplay writer in Hollywood.
Hmm.
His name is Bob Saetz, Saenz,
Hmm.
and it's called "That's Not the Way It Works." And for my money, it was the most truthful and, get the stars out of your eyes, kid, type of book to read,
Yeah.
because what we think of regarding Hollywood or selling something to Hollywood is from our early dreams watching the movies ourselves.
Hmm.
But as his title says, but that's not the way it works. So it's a wake up call. And I would say that's a really good one to start off reading.
Okay, and say that title again. That's not the way it works.
That's not the way it works. And the subtitle is A No Nonsense Guide to the Craft and Business of Screenwriting.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Well, have you got any final words of wisdom for our would-be screenwriters out there, novelists slash screenwriters?
Um, do it, you know, like life is short.
Yeah.
Life is short. The inspiration for me writing the first novel was that COVID scared the daylights out of me. And I thought, I don't want this whatever it is, this pandemic, to take over my life
Mhm.
somehow. And I'm getting on in years, and I want to at least have a novel written.
Mhm.
But, I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd be finishing up a third novel and writing a pilot script right now.
Very exciting.
So do it.
Well, congratulations and good for you. And I can't wait to see number three. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Like you said, we've just scratched the surface, and maybe as you progress through the process, you can come back and let us know when the series is ready to
Oh,
air.
my pleasure.
That would be awesome.
Definitely do that. Thanks, Ann.
Okay, well, we'll see you soon then.
See you soon.
Well, wow, that's a lot to unpack. Thank you so much, Bruce, for joining us today and talking about adapting a novel to screenplay. And like I said, in a couple of weeks, the Paradise Writers Retreat is happening at Oceanstone Seaside Resort, October 30th to November 3rd. And Bruce will be one of the guest presenters who will be doing a workshop on one of the days of the retreat. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to me, Ann at ocpublishing.ca, or visit the website, www.ocpublishing.ca. Let me bring that up one more time, just so you can see it and make sure that it's spelled right. And visit us sometime, and we'll see you again on the author journey next week. So bye for now. And in the meantime, happy writing and reading. Bye.